This secret, GM transmission, part you never knew existed. What if I told you that a tiny $12 Part 1 most people tossed aside when rebuilding a transmission held the power to turn Grandma's Buick into a street racing monster? Not some fancy aftermarket kit, not computer trickery, but a little aluminum housing buried deep inside GM's toughest automatic. In the right hands, this part became the back alley trick of the muscle car era, the invisible upgrade that turned Buicks into monsters. Today, we are diving into the TH400 Governor GM's most underrated engineering gem. If you love uncovering these hidden gems of muscle car history, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment about your favorite sleeper mod. We might feature it in a future video. The year was 1964. General Motors had just unleashed the Turbo Hydromatic 400, or TH400, a 3-speed automatic, that set a new standard for toughness. Cast in iron engineered to handle the brute torque of Cadillac's Oldsmobiles and big block Chevys, it quickly earned a reputation as the bulletproof gearbox of choice. Drag racers, hot rodders, and anyone who needed durability swore by it. But hidden inside this heavy-duty transmission was something most people ignored: a small aluminum case bolted to the output shaft. Inside were two weights, a pair of springs, and a couple of check balls. It did not look like much, but it was the shift brain of the car, the Governor. Here is why it mattered. Automatic transmissions do not magically know when to change gears. They need two inputs. First is throttle pressure, which comes from how hard your foot is buried into the gas. Second is governor pressure, which measures vehicle speed. That is the Governor's job. As the drive shaft spins faster, centrifugal force flings the weights outward. As they move, they open valves and send hydraulic pressure signals back to the valve body, telling the transmission, "We are going fast enough now, shift." It is pure mechanical physics. No sensors, no chips, just Newton's laws at work. The factory setup was tuned for comfort. GM designed Governors so that your mom could glide to the supermarket with silky shifts around 30 or 35 miles per hour. Heavy weights and soft springs meant early lazy gear changes that kept things smooth and quiet. That was perfect for suburban commutes, but absolutely wrong if you were wringing out a big block V8. By the late 1960s, hot rodders had figured out the secret. Walk into any speed shop in 1968, and you would hear the same question: how do I get my Chevelle to shift at $5,000 instead of $3,000? The answer was not a $500 shift kit or a full manual valve body. It was 20 minutes in the parking lot with a screwdriver. You pulled out the Governor, lightened the weights, maybe swapped a spring or two, and suddenly the transmission shifted, like it had been possessed. Here is how it worked. Those stock weights were heavy. They built Governor pressure too soon, which meant early shifts. File a few grams off, make them lighter, and suddenly the car held gears until the engine screamed. A 396 could stay in first until 4,500 RPM, grab second at 5,200, and not shift into third until the engine was truly in its sweet spot. That tiny change completely rewrote the car's character. This trick was gold for the sleeper crowd. Picture a 1969 Chevelle Malibu stock hubcaps. Quiet exhaust, the kind of car you would park at church on Sunday. Nobody gave it a second look until the Governor was tweaked. Light turns green, and suddenly it is shifting like it has got a grudge. Nothing about it screamed fast. But inside the transmission, the Governor had been massaged by someone who understood physics. Light turns green, the Buick launches. Instead of upshifting at grocery getter RPM, it digs in, grabs second at 5,000 RPM with freight train violence, and suddenly that unassuming Buick is pulling away from cars that were supposed to be faster. I once heard a story from Jerry, a Detroit speed shop owner. Jerry told me he barely charged the kid $20 for the tweak. 2 weeks later, that kid stormed back in laughing. He said, "Jerry, I just embarrassed a roadrunner so bad, the guy would not even look at me at the next light." That is when Jerry knew he had created a monster. That is the power of the invisible modification. So what was actually happening inside? The TH400 governor has two weights, primary and secondary. The primary controls the 1-2 shift, while the secondary controls 2-3. Each has its own spring. In stock form setup was 4.5 gram primary, 3.2 gram secondary, soft springs. Trim just a single gram off that primary weight, and suddenly your 1-2 shift screams nearly 800 RPM later. Do the same on the secondary, and the 2-3 follows right in line. It was the cheapest RPM gain you could buy. Suddenly your transmission was tuned for racing without ever pulling the valve body. But weights were not the only trick. Springs mattered just as much. Stiffer springs resisted the movement of the weights, delaying when governor pressure built. Builders discovered you could run lighter weights with stiffer springs and end up with a car that shifted hard and late under throttle, but still behaved on the street. It was a balance, and once you understood it, you could make a transmission feel stock in traffic, but brutal at wide-open throttle. This was garage science at its finest. No dyno sheets, no laptops, just a file, a scale, and a basic grasp of hydraulics. Regular guys, not professional engineers, figured this out in their driveways. For the cost of a Saturday afternoon and a pot of shop coffee, you could turn a mild streetcar into a backstreet legend. The governor was never advertised, never hyped, but it was the secret weapon of the savvy. And that is where the story gets even crazier. Once the basics of filing and trimming weights were mastered, some builders pushed the TH400 governor into pure mad scientist territory. They realized this little aluminum brain could be tuned like an instrument, and every adjustment changed the way a car came alive. Guys would mix and match parts from different governors like puzzle pieces, hunting for the perfect setup. Corvette governors came with lighter weights designed for performance cars, while truck governors carried stiffer springs meant for durability. Put those two together, and you had a custom shift pattern no factory engineer ever dreamed of. Others took it further. Some drilled precise holes in the weights to shave fractions of a gram, giving them exact control over RPM shift points. Builders chasing torque instead of RPM went the opposite route, adding tungsten putty to increase mass, so the transmission shifted earlier and harnessed low-end grunt. I knew an old-timer who kept a postal scale on his workbench just for governors, carefully weighing every piece before slipping it back into place. That kind of attention to detail separated the true pros from the weekend warriors. Because here is the truth, the governor never worked alone. It was part of a bigger hydraulic dance tied to the throttle valve, the vacuum modulator, and the valve body. Change one piece, and the whole balance shifted. The best builders understood that. They did not just lighten weights and hope for the best. They tuned the throttle valve linkage, swapped in stiffer modulator springs, and tweaked the valve body so shifts hit harder without breaking parts. Done right, the car drove like stock in traffic, but transformed into something savage the moment you went wide open. That balance, invisible when cruising, devastating when racing, became the holy grail of street performance. And the beauty? It was reversible. If you did not like the way it shifted, you could drop the stock weights and springs back in. If you wanted to try something new, all you had to do was pull another governor from the junkyard and start again. It gave muscle car guys a cheap, low-risk playground where experimentation was part of the fun. These backyard combinations often worked so well, they would leave modern transmission shops scratching their heads. By the mid-1980s, it looked like the governor's glory days were over. Electronics were taking over. Lockup converters, computer-controlled solenoids, and ECU-programmed shift maps promised precision the old hydraulics could not match. The TH400 itself was being phased out, and most assumed the Governor was dead tech. But here is the twist: it never really died. In fact, today, the TH400 is more popular than ever. Whether it is an LS swap in a Chevelle, a Coyote swap in a Street Rod, or a monster crate engine pushing 4-digit horsepower, builders still choose the TH400 because it is bulletproof, rebuildable, and endlessly tunable. And the Governor, it still works maybe better now than ever. That is because modern builders combine old-school simplicity with new-school knowledge. Instead of eyeballing weight reductions, they run computer simulations to predict how each gram affects shift points. Instead of crude drilling, they 3D print custom weights with perfect mass distribution. One Arizona builder keeps a catalog of more than 200 different Governor combinations, each tailored to specific engines and gearing. Want your LS swapped 1969 Camaro to shift like stock, but hit a 6,500 RPM redline? He has got a spec for that. Want a Coyote-powered Model A that glides through traffic, but slams gears like a drag car when you floor it? There is a Governor tuned just for you. The possibilities are endless, and the science is sharper than ever. But the Governor's true value is not just performance. It represents something we have lost in modern car culture. Today, tuning often means plugging in a laptop, flashing an ECU, or bolting on a prepackaged upgrade. That works, sure, but it is not the same as crawling under your car with a file and a scale. The Governor teaches you about hydraulics, centrifugal force, and how interconnected systems really are. It forces you to feel the car, not just read a screen. And when you finally nail the perfect combination, when the car shifts exactly how you want, crisp on the street and brutal at the track, the satisfaction is something no software update can deliver. The TH400 Governor never got headlines. No magazine covers, no TV shows, no factory hype. It just sat quietly in the back of transmissions doing its job. But in the hands of those who understood it, this little brain turned grocery getters into killers. It gave birth to sleepers that embarrassed big block muscle and even exotic sports cars. It gave everyday gearheads the power to tune their rides with precision for the cost of a pizza and a Saturday afternoon. And it is still doing that today, teaching a new generation the joy of mechanical problem solving. So the next time you think about performance upgrades, do not just picture horsepower numbers or shiny bolt-ons. Remember the Governor. Remember the builders who filed, weighed, and swapped springs because they loved the process, not just the result. They knew the devil was in the details, and they proved that sometimes the simplest technology perfected over decades beats anything high-tech. And trust me, this is just the beginning. Because next time, we are diving into another forgotten performance marvel, Chrysler's legendary Cross-Ram intake. It looked like a moon rocket, sounded like thunder, and made horsepower numbers that defied physics. You will not want to miss it, so make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with a fellow muscle car fan. And let us know in the comments what hidden performance trick you would like us to uncover next.